We have Croatia's Ivan Saric here on the screen. Ivan has had a pretty interesting event in Blitz. He has done well until now. He scored wins against Firuza, against Duda, against Pragrananda, Gukesh. That's a great result for someone who's given a local player wildcard. But now for the final round, he takes on Magnus Carlsen. And Magnus has already won the tournament. So nothing much of pressure on Magnus. He goes for the modern here with d6, knight c3, bishop g7. And this has been something that Magnus has fallen back to from time to time. a6 goes for the Tiger's modern. Tiger Hillap Persson who used to play this, and Magnus stops h4 with h5 now. And you can see that white has a very nice center. The bishop comes out to c4, putting pressure on the f7 point. And Magnus can now bring the knight out to f6 perhaps. Yeah, he does it. And with the bishop on c4, you always have to be careful about knight takes, and d5, forking the two pieces. So, but it may or may not be good. You have to assess it carefully. Right now, knight comes out to f6. And Ivan is thinking about what to do next. He has a few setups here. One is f3, bring the knight to g2, e2 to g3 or f4. Or he can go from h3 to g5. That also seems like a good plan. He goes knight f3. And Magnus, can he go for something like b5, bishop b3, b4, then trying to win the pawn here? But there is knight e2. You can't win the pawn because of bd5. Okay, he goes knight g4, attacking this bishop. The question is whether you want to preserve this bishop with bishop g5. Ivan says, of course I do. I don't want to give up my dark squared bishop. But then Magnus could play f6 and push you away. And so he goes knight to c6 and he's beginning to put some pressure on the d4 pawn. It's not under pressure, so you can go queen d2. Also, this knight on g4, you can't kick it away. It's quite irritating, to be honest. Queen d2 played. And now, does f6 work? Yes, he plays f6 so that if bishop e3, he can chop it off. If bishop f4, maybe e5 in the center. He plays bishop e3. Very interesting stuff in the opening by Magnus. He's trying to play things which are not commonly played at top level and is getting uncharacteristic positions, maybe inspired by freestyle chess. e5 played here. And Ivan long castles. Wow, that's a very, very dangerous move for both sides, I must say. For Magnus, because his king is in the center and going short side might be risky. Takes here, can't take with the queen because of bishop h6. So pawn takes has been taken. And now Magnus is calculating here. He is behind in development. Look at white's pieces. The knight, the queen, the knight, the bishop, the rook coming in. The rook already developed. Meanwhile, black has two rooks that are not developed. The bishop is still on c8. Yeah, it is definitely something to worry about. But you have this very nice move again. E takes d4. Something very concrete. Can't take with the pawn because of bishop h6. And you lose the queen there. Or you are at least in trouble. You have to give up your piece. And if e takes d4, knight takes d4, then knight jumps to e5. And that e5 square is absolutely untouchable. E takes d4 on the board. And now if e takes d4, of course, as we just saw, bishop h6 is there. Maybe Ivan can even go to this extent that, hey, I'm ready to give up material. I'm going knight d5. But he goes knight d4. Knight jumps to e5. Good move by Magnus. He has to calculate all the dangerous knight jumps here to e6. But for now, the bishop is hanging. Also, he can get a very crucial tempo with bg4. He plays c6. Magnus, super quick here, realizes the importance of taking into control the d5 square. Knight goes back to e2. The c knight goes to e2. I was wondering if d knight goes to attack here. But that's okay. You can just go bishop g4. Queen e7 played by Magnus. Knight f4 jumps in. Bishop comes to attack this pawn here. Tough moment. I would say you could even give up this rook for the bishop, because you know these light squares become terribly weak. So Ivan rightly plays his knight to e6, because if takes here, this is very good position for white. Magnus goes bishop h6, preserving his dark squared bishop. Magnus understands that in this position what is more important is not winning this rook, because the other rook will anyway join in, but is to keep his light squared bishop controlling this square. And maybe now queen a5 could be possible, or queen d4, queen c3, some ideas there. Ivan plays queen takes d6, queen takes, rook takes d6, and king e7 by Magnus. Fantastic chess by Magnus Carlsen, because he's attacking this rook, and maybe rook d1 makes a lot of sense to give up that rook, but he goes rook d4, and that's a piece blunder now, because now after bishop e6, very nice move. Look at this. If you take with the bishop here, that's maybe the main move, because if you take with the knight, bishop e3, and you lose the rook. So bishop e6 and then g5, attacking the knight away and then winning this bishop. Magnus does take bishop e6, good move, and look at Ivan there. He knows that he's losing here, and Magnus can just play g5 now. It's over. He's winning. Magnus calculates it. Maybe he takes on f4, and it's a big surprise here, because now Ivan Saric is able to take on e5 and the position has equalized. Unbelievable. Rook d7. Magnus missing a huge opportunity here. White is now doing very well because this is attacked. And look at how both the rooks are on their initial squares, and Magnus is like, what the hell did I just do? I could have just won a piece there. That's very rare to see Magnus missing such a move. And now Ivan Saric, look at his focus. He knows that he can get a draw, and well, I'm sure that there's a bit of regret there. And as a chess player, one faces this every now and then, that you miss a good move, then you see it while the game is going on, and you can't snap out of it. The job of a very good player is to forget it and to come into that moment again and find the best move, which Magnus perhaps has or hasn't. I'm not so sure. He takes on e4. Maybe just take the pawn here. Ivan, can he hunt down this king is the big question, because you have two rooks to attack it, but I guess the king has many squares to go to. And now Ivan Saric is thinking. Magnus down to 1 minute 41 seconds. Ivan has roughly 2 minutes on the clock. Rook e1, and Magnus once again, he's like, what is this that I'm doing here? Check. So in a way, Magnus is in that position where g5 was possible, but now he has to play this position. It's so tough, yeah, sometimes. He goes king f4. Check. The king goes to g3. So risky, so risky. And now take on f6. Yes, Ivan takes it, and you have to defend this pawn either by rook h g8 or rook a g8. Both of them are possible. Plays rook h g8, and now take the pawn on b7. Somehow it seems like white's rooks are super active and doing the job, and the job done by two white rooks is being done by a black king. Take on b7, takes the pawn on h4, and now you can take the pawn here on c6. That could be a good idea. then you have to work with king g3 trying to win this pawn. So complex. Ivan has 1 minute 19 seconds, Magnus 1 minute 18 seconds. He comes rook b3 trying to cut the king off. Rook a f8 would be a nice move. Trading one pair of rooks is to white's black's advantage, because the king is so weak. Then king is so advanced that once one rook is gone, the king would never fear checkmate. Check, king up, another check, and now important here to go to e1 so as to keep this possibility of third rank being open. He goes king e3, but now rook takes g2 happens. And this is where, like, if you give a check, I can now go king h3. And if the king was back on e1, that would not have been possible. So a huge mistake there by Ivan, playing quickly but making an error. And now he's shaking his head. Magnus seems to have gotten back his advantage. Rook takes a6 played. Magnus goes g5, good move. Although white has an extra pawn here, you see Magnus was not tempted by winning off a pawn. He saw what is more important, which is to queen his own pawn. White wants to start rolling his own pawns down the board now. Check. If king f2, there is rook f8 check. That's a problem. And the problem is because the king would be then cut off. He goes king e4, takes cb, g4. And the idea is g3, g2, g1. The rook is beautifully placed. And we talked about Magnus's rooks not being active. Well, they just got super active and in the right place. King e3, g3, you can't come in close, and Ivan resigns there. And Magnus smiles, Ivan smiles. I guess they are discussing about the fact that Magnus could have won a piece there with g5. But yeah, Magnus Carlsen wins the tournament with a very healthy margin of 2.5 points, I believe. He played fantastically on the first day of Blitz, and in the second day it was good enough to take home the victory. As always, Magnus, this is his 10th win at Grand Chess Tour, and what a player he is.